that's what it's all about. And, I mentioned public funding, but at the end of the day, the bulk of our funding is philanthropic. And so I would encourage your listeners to look at an organization like Father Joe's Villages, who is effective in what it's doing, that helps those not only who are on the streets, but the community at large.
Cloudcast 180. Powerful people, powerful stories, 180 seconds.
The San Diego Union Tribune and Retirement Strategies Group present the Union Tribune Community Spotlight Show with your host, Drew Schlossberg.
I'm Drew Schlossberg of the San Diego Union Tribune, and we are joined with author Helen Fields, who has done a crime book series based in Scotland. We're talking about Perfect Remains. She was a criminal lawyer. A lot of her content in the book, I think, comes from her experiences and we were chatting right before a break, about, getting into writing and all that business. I'm going to hold off on that for a second, but I want to talk a little bit about Degrees of Guilt. What's that all about?
So that's a book about a woman who is standing trial for an attempted murder. We open the book when she's standing over the body of her husband, who she thinks is dead, but actually she hasn't quite killed him. And as we go through, so you see the trial, but you see it both from her perspective and from the perspective of one of the jurors. So you follow them into the jury room and you see the debates. And it's about coercive control. So it's about a kind of 20-year marriage where gradually she's been cut off from her friends, cut off from her family, doesn't have access to money, is told she doesn't need a car anymore, this sort of thing. And gradually her whole sense of herself is eroded. It's about that. It's about whether or not she is the person who attempted to kill him and why. And then you see it from the juror's point of view, and you've got a much younger housewife on the juror who starts off thinking that she isn't really qualified, shouldn't be there, and can't make her mind up. And she becomes a pivotal player. But there's a lot more going underneath it. But it's quite interesting. This is a big deal globally at the moment. You're getting a lot more cases about recognizing long-term psychological harm. We talk a lot about physical violence in relationships. It's taken a really long time to understand a bit more about psychological abuse done in relationships and how that affects people when they suddenly snap years and years later. And it isn't always women, it's men, it's older people in the community who might be being psychologically abused by younger family members or friends. And it's something we have a growing understanding of this. And I wanted to write a book about it, a book that really examines just how badly that affects people.
Yeah, I'm glad one of our frequent guests on our show is Heather Finley. Heather is the CEO of the YWCA of San Diego County, which focuses on domestic violence. And unfortunately, it's not something that's going down in this country, in this region. It's going up, to your point. You must see a lot of it when you were a criminal lawyer. And it's funny you bring this up because we talk more about the psychological abuse than we talk about the physical abuse. They're both horrible, to be honest with you. But abuse is abuse. And you said it spot on, and that is, taking control. You can't drive the car. I got the bank account. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Did you ever prosecute cases like this at all?
I did, and I did a lot of domestic violence injunctions.
Right.
So injunctions where women are attempting to leave and to stop men from having access to them, and I did it over and over again. And I think that's right. The awful thing is that the bone might heal. You break a bone, it will heal eventually. But what goes alongside that, the lack of trust and the constant fear, that just doesn't heal. It takes a really long time. And there's always, what we don't recognize, there's always psychological violence when there's physical violence. You can't hit someone in the face and say that's just a physical act. It's not. It's about dominance. It's big level bullying. It's taking school ground bullying to the next level. And it just demeans people and it drags them down, and it's incredibly hard to walk away from. And it's all about power play, however you want to think about it, whatever type of violence it is, it's about asserting power. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with.
Right, yeah. And, I don't think we can talk about it enough. I don't think we can put more money into it enough to try to, curb this aspect of it, get to the root of the problems. We all know that a lot of the people who are abusive were abused also as kids, and it's a tough cycle to break in this aspect, but someone needs to do some of that. So Degrees of Guilt. All the books are on Amazon?
They are, yes.
Okay,
yeah.
right, exactly. So just Google author Helen Fields, and you'll see, like I did, and you see all the wonderful books you have.
You will, yes.
All right, so here's a very tough and an unfair question, okay? But at least I'm letting you know ahead of time. We're chatting again with author Helen Fields. Do you have a favorite of the books you've done?
I actually do. And
Okay.
it's a book called, I don't think even I should say this, but actually one of the series is
Yeah.
called Perfect Silence.
Uh-huh.
And the reason it's my favourite is because it was the first book I wrote from the perspective not just of the police and the detectives, but
Right.
I also wrote it from the perspective of 4 of the victims. Because what I think we do in crime fiction that I find difficult when I read it, and I find slightly offensive actually, really because of my history as a lawyer, is that we tend to just put these faceless, almost nameless victims. Woman is found floating down river. She's already dead. We never hear or see about what she went through, about how scared she was, about how terrified she was, knowing probably that she's going to die in those last moments. We don't really do it. We don't do it for some good reasons, because it's quite scary and it's quite upsetting and emotional. But as somebody who has worked with victims and had to listen to their stories, actually it's really important that we don't just minimize the effect on victims and say, here's a body. We really do. When we're reading and writing crime fiction, we need to remember, first of all, that there are real victims out there,
Right.
and that we can reflect their voices and their experiences when we write books. So we can do something useful with our writing. And also we can give it real context and real depth. And the first time I did that, I found myself, when I was writing, very affected by the stories of the women I was writing. And in their last couple of days each, going inside their heads and trying to be strong, trying to be brave, trying to fight, or trying to give up, or trying to negotiate. You know, all these phases that people go through that, frankly, we don't write about enough.
Right. We're chatting with author Helen Fields, author of Perfect Remains and all her books of the crime series set in Scotland, and the degrees of guilt. I wanted to chat with you just a little bit. We've got about a few minutes left here. What advice do you give to people to say, man, that is very, very cool what she does. I want to do the same thing. And knowing that you just can't just start and you're publishing books the next day. Well, maybe you can. I don't know. What advice would you give?
I think there's an often repeated phrase, which is write what you know. Now, I don't agree with that at all. That's what research is for. That's what libraries and books and
Right.
search engines and the internet is for. But what you absolutely should do is write what you love. If you don't feel really passionate about what you're writing, then it's not going to work. It's not going to grip anyone. And so I think find the thing that really sets you on fire. Don't worry about whether or not you know about, expert coffee making in Brazil. Read something about it, make a phone call. That sort of thing doesn't matter. But if you feel absolutely passionately about the kind of, the memory you have of the romance when you went there and you met a Brazilian guy and you think you can put some of that romance back into a book, then do the research around it. But write something that sets you on fire is my best advice, because if you do that, you're going to write a good book.
Yeah. How much do you read?
I read a lot. I'm very lucky. I get a lot of free books because people send me books from other authors
Right.
that I can review for them and give them a little bit for the back of the blurb and the back of the book.
Right.
And that's a real privilege.
Right.
It does quite often mean that I get sent a lot of crime books, and I read much more broadly than that. So I think my only problem really is that I quite often get sent books and I'm thinking, I really want to read I read lots of historical. I love kind of Colson Whitehead,
Right.
books like that. I'm just reading a book called Whiskey When We're Dry by John Larison, which is a historic American piece, which is beautiful. So I read very broadly, and I read a lot. I find it very difficult to read crime books while I'm in the middle of writing, because I find that other bits of procedures, other ideas sink into my head, and I need to keep what I'm writing very clean and very much my voice.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you. There's a lot of authors in this world, and some outstanding authors. That how do you create your own voice and try to differentiate yourself? And if you spend too much time trying to do that, you're going, wait a minute here. Now I'm not even writing what I'm supposed to be writing, for God's sake. How do you do that? Got about a minute and a half to go.
Yeah, so I think you have to be very relaxed when you're writing. I don't think you can try. I think there's a huge mistake to try and write in a certain style that isn't your natural voice, because halfway through you lose it. anyway. You can't maintain a style that is pretentious or a put-on style.
Right.
So your narrative voice has to be your own. I think what's really, really important also is then when you're writing crime books, when you're writing any sort of fiction, you shouldn't hear the narrator's voice too much. The best books we read are the books where you can't really hear the narrator's style. You're not really aware of it because it's so fluent and fluid and easy to read, is that you're really hearing that as if you were speaking it out loud.
Right. Now, have you ever taught a class in writing?
I have. I've done some teaching.
Yeah, I can tell right now. I mean, you're doing a great job on this over here. I'd sign up for it and then show you some of the columns I wrote when I was a sports writer and go, really? They actually paid you to write this? My goodness. On this. Shout out the website again and how we can get your books. And I can't tell you what a delight it's been to have you on the show.
It's been fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, so all over, whether it's Amazon or Apple or everywhere on the internet, or helenfields.co.uk. But I'm on Twitter. I love people contacting me on Twitter and sending me a quick silly GIF or something. It brightens my day. So if you can find me on Twitter, please say hello.
That's right. Can people send you ideas as well?
They can.
Okay.
They can, yes.
Okay, good. You may get one from Drew.Schlossberg at SD Union Tribune, and if I were you, I'd block it permanently. Helen Fields, great to see you. Wonderful to see your terrific husband sitting in the studio. Wishing you and the family nothing but great travels to Calgary. I can't wait to hear all about it when you come back, and promise me you'll come back on the show again.
Absolutely, I'd love to. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Helen Fields is the author of Perfect Remains. Go look at all of her wonderful books up on Amazon. I'm Drew Schlossberg, and you've been listening to another edition of the Community Spotlight Show here on Cloudcast Media Radio.
Thank you for listening to a podcast from Cloudcast Media, the digital media home for leading local brands. When it comes to amplifying your brand, a Cloudcast-sponsored show offers unbeatable value. Learn more at cloudcast.us.
Cloudcast 180. Powerful people, powerful stories, 180 seconds.
Welcome to Cloudcast 180, the 3-minute lightning round with changemakers here in San Diego. We're here with Ed Heiner, 20-year Navy SEAL, best-selling author, and education entrepreneur. Ed, welcome to the Cloudcast 180.
Thanks for having me.
Your book was called First Fast Fearless, so let's hit this fast and fearlessly. Real quick, you created a program to help change lives of high school students around the country. It's called Sealpreneurship. Tell our audience what it's all about.
Well, it's about leading yourself. Getting a PhD in me. I teach kids how to take care of themselves and lead themselves first, and how to be their own entrepreneur, intrapreneur, if you will.
Is it something you think public education is lacking, this concept of self-leadership?
Absolutely. It's a mindset that kids don't get. My son doesn't get in his school. The kids don't get it. It's something that, we're educating them, but to be mentally tough and be able to take charge of themselves and accountable for themselves is very unique.
Okay. I've seen an overview of your curriculum, 23 evolutions, and you have a 23-minute podcast series. So what's up with 23?
Chromosomes, right? It's all in all of us. We're all the same. 99.9% of everybody in this world is the same. And we use those chromosomes, 23 pairs, which was one of the concepts we teach as swim buddies, never be alone. Mm-hmm. Always work with someone else, collaborate, and be out there.
Boy, that's a lesson for life for sure. Ed, you were in charge of basic and advanced training for the U.S. Navy SEALs, and I mentioned you're a 20-year SEAL. Tell our audience the greatest lesson from the SEALs that have changed you forever.
Probably in the back of a helicopter one night in Iraq before I was getting ready to fly into an Al-Qaeda target, it dawned on me that when a pilot said, you have this many souls on board, it dawned on me that the opposite of fear is love. It's not else. I don't fight for what I hate in front of me. I fight for what's beside me and behind me that I love.
Wow, it's a powerful concept. Wow. You've talked a lot about the blue-collar scholar as a concept. Fascinating. Tell our audience, what is the blue-collar scholar as it relates to your Sealpreneurship program?
It's a mental concept where people take control. Don't outsource their life. Look, we're going to have people that are in white coats, suits and ties, doctors, PhDs. That's fine. Listen to that and learn your information from them. But eventually, you got to be that mechanic in your own life. You got to turn the wrench. This is happening. So basically, take control of your own life. Use what you can use from other people. Discard it, what you can't, and make that your own. Leadership is something that you do. It's you do with people, not to them. And one of the best forms of leadership I learned in the back of that helicopter is called MOM.
Ed,
Focus
thanks.
on mission, others, me.
Mission, others, me. Ed, thank you for being here. This has been the Cloudcast 180. We hit it fast and fearlessly. We're out.
Cloudcast 180. Powerful people, powerful stories, 180 seconds.